Most people who regularly use the platform will be aware of the constant criticism of YouTube and their practices. Across the last few years, waves of criticism have come from all corners of the YouTube community, with creators who make their living off the platform offering up a damning judgment of its actions. In the last few years, there's been the attempted integration with Google+, the so-called adpocalypse, suspicious about the inbuilt biases of the trending page, constant unannounced tweaking of the algorithm, routinely and seemingly random demonetization, copyright controversy, and experiments with the subscription feed. No other company attracts criticism for its decisions in the same way. People want YouTube to act in accordance with a higher standard than most massive corporations. So why is this request a natural and logical reaction to the website, as opposed to a random, misguided response to the business practices of a company that is merely seeking profit? Part 1. YouTube as a monopoly. Advocates for capitalism argue that society thrives on the basis of competition. For example, if I set up an apple shop, I will want to make my apples as delicious and as cheap as possible to ensure my customers do not purchase their apples from an alternative vendor. This motivates everyone to make the system of apple production as cost effective as possible, whilst creating the highest quality apples, therefore guaranteeing the best possible society. If I start engaging in unfair business practices or serving up mouldy apples, consumers will have an alternative source of apples in the form of all other apple shops. However, the system breaks down when a company has complete control of a certain sector. Take, for example, the water industry in the UK. Each house only has one choice for a water provider who they can either pay or have no water. This is because it will be wholly impractical to have many different companies tearing up the roads running multiple water pipes to homes. This lacks the core advantage of capitalism, which is the competition and the choice of the consumer. It can and would lead to issues such as vastly unfair prices without the state regulation offered by Ofwat. The term for companies like this, which have a complete or dominant control of the market, is a monopoly. Legal and economic definitions of non-natural monopolies tend to exist at around 25% of market share. YouTube shares the trait of water companies in the way that the service it provides lacks true competition. There is no real YouTube competitor who can offer either the users or creators on the platform a satisfactory alternative. In November 2016, a study of the leading multimedia websites in the United States, based on market share of visits, gave YouTube a share of 78.8%, with its closest competitor being Netflix on 8%. Services that allow any creator to upload to a platform other than YouTube all had less than 1% of the market share. This means that users must accept any changes they disagree with. So, if, for example, YouTube removed the subscription feed, creators and viewers may get annoyed, but they will be unlikely to move to another platform because there is no viable alternative. This increases the severity of anger towards YouTube, as people cannot just switch to an alternative provider, so their only option is to vent at the company in the hope of change. The YouTube as a monopoly argument has been made before, but in reality it goes much further than just being a monopoly. The reason people are so averse to YouTube is that due to being a monopoly and having a lack of competitors, it acts more like a state than a private company in many ways. Part 2. YouTube as a state. The Oxford English Dictionary defines a state as a nation or territory considered as an organised political community under one government. This portrays a state as an entity with two parts, a nation and then a government attached to the nation. A nation is a collection of people bound together by a shared identity, whether this is through a common language, religion, history, or merely occupying the same geographical area. Language and religion, however, aren't crucial factors. There are many countries with the same language that identifies different nations, and the UK doesn't divide itself into a nation of Catholics, Protestants, atheists, etc. There are also countries such as Canada who are bilingual, so language isn't a deciding factor. The crucial aspect is the common history and tradition that binds together all the members of the nation, and this is something that can be seen within the users of YouTube. Within YouTube, there are plenty of subcultures of gamers, drama channels, makeup channels, etc. And all together, there is a shared identity between everyone involved. Within the YouTube community, there are even scandals, news, and controversies. Viewers form parasocial bonds with content creators, but also with the platform itself. The feedback systems of subscriptions, ratings, and comment sections only serve to further this cultural link between people scattered all across the world. This shared sense of identity is likely weaker than that of a standard nation, but in an increasingly globalized and internet-focused world, people's identities are becoming more separated from their traditional state. Identities can instead become attached to, for example, members of the YouTube gaming community. YouTube itself even encourages this relationship, with the platform offering videos like YouTube Rewind and the trophy subscriber rewards. When YouTube acts in a way that people are unhappy with, it is not just the damaging of a product, it's the offending of the core of a community. The second part of the YouTube state, a government attached to the nation, is much clearer. A government is a group of people with the authority to make decisions within the state. This means that anyone involved in making decisions within the company of YouTube is essentially part of the YouTube government. Content creators who earn their living off ad revenue operate similar to public service jobs, with their income being dependent on the actions of the YouTube government, but also their role serving the wider demands of the community. What's more interesting is the source of authority for this government. Because YouTube is a company, the authority of the people making the decision traces back to the original content creators of YouTube. When the founding fathers of the website launched it in February 2005, they began a chain of passing down of authority which continued to Google's management of the company following its purchase in November 2006. This is more like the passing down of power in a dictatorship than in a democratic state, possibly serving as a source of constant backlash against YouTube. Usually the feeling of democratization would come from the ability of the community to switch to a different platform, but due to its monopolist nature, this option is unavailable. Part 3. The rule of law and how YouTube can be better. YouTube is not going to democratize the way they run their company. There will be no elections between users of the platform for the next CEO, because at the end of the day, they are a profit machine, not an actual state. So what value can be derived from this comparison? In public law, there is a principle known as the rule of law. This principle can be applied to all states, democratic or dictatorship, and serves as a rule book for how laws should be made and introduced. For those more informed on the topic, we'll be focusing merely on the formal conception of the rule of law, as espoused by Joseph Raz. He believes that there are 8 key principles that a state must follow to allow a fair application of law. These principles can be applied to YouTube as a guide for how they should run their company. All laws should be prospective, open, and clear. This means that YouTube should no longer retrospectively demonetize videos that were considered acceptable at the time. They also need to be more clear about the meaning of all community guidelines, as they are notoriously vague. Laws should be relatively stable. Sudden changes will not make the people happy. To keep the website stable, the rules should be the same as much as possible. Any changes should be given clear notice. Clear rules and procedures for making laws. YouTube needs to make it clear to both their creators and their users when they're experimenting with systems, be it the algorithm or the subscription feed, not just continue their current practice of hoping no one notices. The company should increase its openness, offering a consultation stage when it changes the platform, asking creators how they feel about potential changes. Independence of the judiciary must be guaranteed. Understanding who is making decisions in the enforcement of laws. There are many accusations that the Content ID system favours claimants over creators. The people ruling over these disputes should be independent of any ulterior motive by YouTube. The courts should have review powers over legislation, the courts should be easily accessible, and the principles of natural justice must be observed. These three principles all surround the appeals process against laws. This can be applied to the appeals process in regards to the demonetization of videos on the grounds of the community guidelines. The process should be easy and accessible to those with limited powers and funds. Much like the economy of a state, YouTube has a combination of independent creators and much larger, powerful businesses. This system must account for this. The discretion of the crime-preventing agencies should not be allowed to pervert the law. The rules need to apply to everyone equally. There are many accusations that large creators get preferential treatment from YouTube. In the words of Lord Denning, "Be you ever so high, the law is higher." Following these principles, YouTube could become a more harmonious place with less criticism from its own community. The company will continue to be a monopoly for the foreseeable future, and this is a way of mitigating the damaging effects of that. This wouldn't fix all of the problems of YouTube, because at the end of the day, they are a company on the search for profit. There is no way that you can make them not bend to the will of the advertisers who give them their primary source of revenue. However, it could stop those who work on the platform feeling completely out of control of their fate and livelihood. Thanks for watching.